It is in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. This is a quote from life coach Tony Robbins. Every decision you make determines your future, so why go with a public defender when a private attorney will give you a much better outcome? Some people may argue that hiring a private attorney rather than getting a public defender appointed to you has no effect on the case outcome, but that's not always true. Although some may argue the type of attorney hired makes no difference on the outcome of a case, studies have been done that show a private defense attorney is a clear choice to a successful outcome. For example, let's take a look at O.J. Simpson's case. In an article done by Business Insider, Jason Geracio argues that hiring a private attorney does affect the outcome of your case, as proven by the O.J. Simpson case. Geracio quotes an interview done with O.J. When asked if he thinks the outcome would have been the same if he was just an average, middle-class guy rather than a rich ex-NFL player, he replied by saying, "I would have no chance." O.J. brought together what is now referred to as the Dream Team, which was a set of highly successful private lawyers hired to get O.J. out of his situation. The lawyers cost him $50,000 a day, but he had the money for it, and he even admits, like I said previously, that if he was just an average person without private defense attorneys, he would have been worse off. This is just one example of how much of a difference hiring a private attorney can make on the outcome of one's case. In addition to this, there are plenty of other arguments to make about why private attorneys are the better choice, but the most common one is the fact that public attorneys are overworked and underpaid. Alexa Van Brunt of The Guardian goes into depth on why this affects the outcome of cases in negative ways. In her article, she states, quote, "Overworked and poorly prepared attorneys were unable to provide effective representation to those they counsel," unquote. Public defenders are burdened with a huge caseload and as a result don't have the amount of time needed to review each case in order to put forth the strongest possible position for their client. Van Brunt also mentions that with public defenders, 95% of criminal cases end in a plea bargain because it's easier for the attorney to get as many cases off their plate and deal with it that way because they have such a large caseload. This isn't fair for the clients because they didn't get a fair trial. It was also found that 73% of county public defender officers exceeded the maximum recommended limit of cases. This is a huge problem because it proves how overworked the public defenders are. Van Brunt goes on to say that public defenders were working for far less than an hour per case on average. That's not nearly an adequate enough amount of time to really study the case, understand it, and give your client a fair chance at a positive outcome. Alexa Van Brunt's studies prove how public defenders are not as effective in gaining a successful case outcome because they don't have enough time to prepare and study each case individually as they should, whereas private attorneys can choose which cases to accept and not accept, so they don't burden themselves with too many cases. By doing this, they're able to spend more time on each individual case to give their client the best possible outcome they can. The inability for a public defender to really focus on each case is a major downside, but some people argue that the case outcome isn't affected by this. According to Tom Jacobs of Pacific Standard, based on research performed by a research team from the University of Texas at San Antonio, there appears to be no difference in the outcome of cases based on the type of attorney the defendants have. Jacobs includes a quote from the study in his article that states, quote, "The type of attorney representing the defendant was not influential on any of the 4 decision-making points examined here," unquote. In the study referenced in this article, the research team studied 4 specific areas of the decision-making process to help them come to their conclusion. This proposes a flaw. They only studied 4 specific areas, which makes it an unreliable study because who's to say the other areas that weren't studied aren't affected by the type of attorney? Although the researchers from the University of Texas at San Antonio provide the readers with statistics to support their claim, it cannot honestly state that in all cases the outcome is not affected because they narrowed down their study looking at just a few points. I'm not saying private attorneys are godsends, because they're not. They have downsides too. HG.org goes into more details about the different pros and cons to both a public defender and a private defense attorney. They have determined that even through the disadvantages of a private attorney, they should still be your number one option. HG states, quote, "The advantages of hiring a private lawyer often far outweigh the disadvantages," unquote. The only real advantages to having a public defender is the no cost and their experience. Otherwise, there are a plethora of disadvantages. They're overworked and underpaid, which may lead to mistakes or unpreparedness. They have limited time to meet with their clients, and they may even attempt to lessen their caseload by encouraging clients to take a plea bargain, like I mentioned earlier. whereas the only real disadvantage to a private attorney is the cost. By hearing the disadvantages and advantages of each, a private attorney is clearly the better, more effective choice for anyone who can afford it. They give their clients a better opportunity to get what they want because they are more adequately prepared and have more time to investigate each case than the public defenders do. Now, I understand that sometimes people don't always have the decision to choose a private attorney because of its cost. But for those who do have the choice, you don't want to lose the case all because you chose to go with the easier, more money-friendly choice. Make sure you make the right choice because one wrong decision can carve the pathway for the rest of your future.